Hey everyone, Jeff Moss here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're dropping an episode from my radio show / podcast called All the Right Moves. And the show has a segment called I Knew a Guy. The kind of decisions people made around real estate and mortgages that seemed like a great idea at the time. And in this episode, we've got two stories. And honestly, both of them come down to the same problem. People who decided what they wanted first and then tried to make the math work backwards. Story one is a couple who fell in love with a house they flat out could not afford. And instead of adjusting their expectations, they went out and found a loan that let them pretend they could. Story two, it's about a guy who came in for a pre-approval and it turned out his monthly debt payments were higher than his monthly income, at least on paper. And neither of these people did anything illegal. They just skipped the step where you figure out what you can afford before you decide what you want. And that's the whole point of this segment. You learn it the easy way by listening to somebody else's story, or you learn it the expensive way. So just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip to buy a house.
All right, for this week, my I Knew a Guy is a husband and wife I dealt with years ago that came into my office and they wanted to get a qualification for a loan, and they fell in love with this $500,000 house. And this is years ago. When $500,000 house, that was quite a house. And that's one of the things we try to teach people. Don't fall in love with a house till I give you the key at the end, right? But so they're in love with this $500,000 house, and they both were gainfully employed. They both had decent incomes, but they had zero margin for anything, right? And they had used their credit. They had pretty good credit scores. But when I took a hard look at this, no, you guys, you can't actually qualify for a loan with your down payment, with the payment that's going to be, you can't qualify at $500,000 purchase. But you could barely squeak by, maybe this one just barely under $400,000. I wasn't trying to steer them towards some house or something. I'm trying to help them get a loan that they could actually qualify for. And so they are the ones that breach the subject of having a negatively amortizing loan, one that they owe more in 5 years than they started with. Now I'm like, I don't like these loans anyway. It doesn't help a whole lot of people, but why do you want to go there? Well, because we can afford a house on a $380,000 purchase, and that's where the payment would be. And so we can buy this house that we can't afford. Oh, wait, okay. What happens
Did they actually say those words?
No, that's when I'm paraphrasing. I'm good paraphrasing. But they were telling me we can't make this payment on a $500,000 purchase, but we can on the $380,000. We can do a negative amortization loan, and so I'm explaining you'll owe more at the end of 5 years. Yeah, I know. And I said, well, what happens if your family starts to grow and you've got an extra mouth to feed, a couple extra mouths to feed? You have no margin in your budget and no breathing room at all.
And I'll interrupt you real quickly to explain the neg am loan, just kind of briefly. In a normal mortgage, you're paying interest and you're paying principal, so that in 30 years the loan's going to be totally paid off. In a neg am loan, you're not even paying the full interest amount. So you're not paying down the principal, but in addition to that, you're adding to the principal because of the interest that you're not paying every month. So if your interest was $500 and you're paying $300, the $200 difference is added onto the principal every month.
Right.
So in about 5 years, you're going to owe, in many cases, quite a bit more than what you started with.
And that was a time in the market, it was an adjustable rate anyway on that neg am part. And it was a time in the market where it could grow every year. It was going to grow every year. So they would owe even worse and worse. And then when I mentioned about what about the family growth and how you're going to take care of that, she actually said, well, my parents will help out. Your parents will help out? I can't have your parents helping out on the loan unless we use your parents. By the time we're done, I'm trying to talk them into buying this $380,000 loan instead of
a house they can afford.
A house they could afford then. And look, 3 years from now, turn it over, upgrade. Why not? And they walked out of my office not getting a loan. A few months later, they walked into my office to rub it in my face that they were able to get the loan that they wanted. They showed it to me and everything, and the guy took them for costs too. I took advantage of them on costs and fees, and I showed them. They didn't care. They were getting the house that they wanted, and they showed that I don't know what happened to them because I didn't stay in touch with them. If their family grew, they made the wrong move. If at the end of 5 years and they had to change this loan and it converted into a fixed rate, it was going to be at a rate much worse than they could have gotten on a fixed rate to start with. So again, a wrong move. All we needed to do was to be a little bit patient and plan to succeed. Do the budget on the front end to see what you can afford. Don't pick a house and see if you can afford it. See what you can afford and then pick a house.
So get approved first for a loan before you buy a house.
That's why they even call pre-qualifying. Not to get the loan, to see how much you can get. So there's my I knew a guy.
That's good advice. And real quick, if you're finding this channel useful, do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Every week I put out content about real estate, mortgages, and living in the Inland Empire. The stuff that helps you make better decisions, and subscribing means you won't miss it. And if you've got a question about buying, selling, or financing a home out here in the IE, drop it in the comments. I read everything you guys put in down there. My I knew a guy is kind of similar. It was somebody who was trying to get a loan, and he came in to be pre-approved, and I ran his credit and pulled his income, and I'm looking at his income, and he's a W-2 employee, meaning he gets a paycheck on a regular basis. He's not self-employed. He works for somebody else. And so I calculated his income, then I added up all the bills that showed up on his credit report, and I realized that they were about the same.
Wait, his income and his outgo?
Yes. And that was outgo that was showing just on his credit report. So your credit report doesn't reflect your car insurance. It doesn't reflect food, something important like food, utilities, just, the various things. The credit report's going to show basically your house payment, your car payment, your credit cards, and things like that. And his car payment and his credit cards, total monthly payment, actually was over what he made every month. And so, in something like that, you think, well, they must have other income. So I asked, okay, well, what other kind of income do you have? Now, he did have some money that he kind of got under the table, second job, unrelated to his W-2 income. But, unless you're doing a stated income loan, which they don't exist anymore for owner-occupied homes, regular loan, you can't use that income because you can't document it.
Right.
And so I said, well, I can't really use that. But even factoring that money in, I wasn't really sure how this guy could live, because you mentioned food. Maybe he wants to eat occasionally.
Was he totally delinquent on all of his credit?
No, his credit was good. So that led me to believe, okay, he has other money coming in, or, and I asked him about this, the or is, are you using your credit cards to live? So that's a common thing with people, and it's a really good sign that somebody's not budgeting. If you have to pay for your groceries or your utilities or something like that on a credit card,
right,
then it means you're probably, unless you're trying to get points. I know my dad puts a lot of things, he found a credit card with 5% back, and so he was using that, trying to get that 5% back on everything. But
he's buying things that he could afford to pay for.
Right.
He's just paying off his credit card.
Exactly, and he'll pay it off every month. But in this guy's case with the client, I knew a guy, he was using it basically to survive, because he was spending more. One time he started spending more than what he made, and he couldn't get out of that rut. And then once he started having too many credit cards to make up for the past debt, then it's almost impossible to get out of that without doing something. And,
right, some's got to change.
And for some people, that ends up being bankruptcy. But we try not to go there. In this case, I actually counseled the guy a little bit, gave him some paperwork to help him get on a budget, see what he could do about his credit cards. Really, in his case, adding income was the only thing that was going to help him. So, and to try to steer away from adding to that, if he can pull back on some of his expenses.
Loan him a pair of scissors to cut those cards.
That's right, yeah. But in the end, again, this guy, I don't know what happened to it. It was a long ways from, I just kind of helped him with a plan and sent him on his way.
Budgeting, planning to succeed, seeing how much you have and seeing what you can do with it.
Yeah, that's the way you want to do it. If you're going to buy a house, you need to get with a loan mortgage professional. If you need a plan, most of them, I don't know if most will help you with a plan, but at National One Mortgage, we help people all the time with a plan. And in some cases with budgeting, I've done a lot of financial counseling. I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
Helping people get on a budget and a plan to be able to buy that house. All right. Those are your two I Knew a Guy stories for this week. The thing both stories have in common, neither one of them started with a budget. They both started with a want. The right move, and I say this all the time, is to figure out what you can qualify for before you fall in love with a house. Get pre-approved, know your numbers, and then go shopping. That's not me being boring. That's me keeping you from sitting across the desk from a loan officer in 5 years, wondering how you got here. If you're in the Inland Empire and you want to actually sit down and run the numbers before you make a move, that's what I do. I've done a lot of financial counseling over the years, and I'd rather have that conversation with you now rather than when you become our next I Knew a Guy story. And drop your questions in the comments. And if you've got a real estate or mortgage story of your own, I want to hear it. No names required, and you might end up in a future episode. Hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's about to make a move without doing the math first. I'm Jeff Moss, and we'll see you next time out in the IE.